Good weekend to you. Welcome to Leading Edge. I'm Jerry Anderson. Well, folks, it is here. Well, first of all, May is here this weekend, which means the May 3rd primary can't be too far behind. We vote, if we haven't already, on Tuesday, May 3rd. Or do we vote? I'm wondering, because some early voting totals show that turnout is way down from where it was 4 years ago. Now, some are blaming the ongoing legislative districting fiasco down in Columbus for disenfranchising folks who, frankly, may not know what district they should vote in or they live in. But despite that disappointing turnout so far, there are some dandy races on the ballot as Ohioans this year, I'll guarantee you, will elect a new U.S. Senator _new. I can guarantee that. Also going to elect a governor who may or may not be new. Now, much attention is, as we have reported on the show, focused on the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate. Makes sense. A Republican holds the seat, and now the GOP certainly wants to keep it that way. A crowded field is spending millions trying to get elected, or in some cases, it appears, trying to keep somebody else from getting elected. Have you seen the brutal attacks on fellow party members? Remember, this is not coming from the other party, it's coming from within. Partisan blood, it appears, only runs so deep. And in that race, a big move this week. Last week, we told you about the important endorsement J.D. Vance got from former President Trump. So I've been waiting for polling, and this week we finally got some. The endorsement did give J.D. Vance a bump, no doubt about it. A Fox News poll taken April 20th through the 24th, so that's through last weekend, 906 registered voters. I prefer likely voters, but this was registered voters. Now puts J.D. Vance in first place, 23% of the vote. Josh Mandel slips to second, 18%. Mike Gibbons, who's blowing through his own money like water, 13.5%. Matt Dolan, 11.5%. Jane Timken, 7.0%. Margin of error, plus or minus 3%. I find this interesting. The poll also showed that nearly a quarter, almost 25% of those asked, admitted to being still undecided, which could swing everything. But if the numbers hold, Vance in first place, so does Mr. Trump's hold of the Ohio Republican Party, it seems. Stay tuned for that. Now, back to the negative messaging that viewers regularly tell us. We hear it all the time. We've seen it in polling. We hate the negative ads they tell us, but the producers of those ads, the political people, tell us that those ads work, that they can show me statistically that me as a candidate saying the other guy stinks makes a significant amount of voters think the other guy stinks, at least worse than I stink. Now, my first guest, and I'm welcome her in, has been on the receiving end of some of that intra-party love. We're putting that in air quotes because it's cynical, in her quest to be the Republican nominee for Ohio's 9th Congressional District, the seat held for nearly 40 years by Democratic incumbent Marcy Kaptur of Toledo. Theresa Gavarone, State Senator from Ohio's 2nd District. Nice to have you here. So I looked it up. I see a 90% rating for you from the American Conservative Union, and yet you're described, I'm just quoting here, don't blame the messenger, you're described as a, quote, liberal hack in TV ads aired either by your opponent or some mysterious political action committee who we don't know who they are. I'll unpack that in a second. How do you react to that?
Well, that was really shocking to see, honestly. I've got the highest conservative rating of anyone else in this race. And yet that is a point that they seem to want to lead voters to believe is not true, which is really disheartening. I've got a conservative track record in the General Assembly. I'm the only candidate in the race endorsed by Right to Life. And
I have a list of where you have voted on things, and there's nobody going to look at these votes and say liberal. You're not going to be confused with liberal by people who actually want to follow the truth. So that leads me to this. Me and my viewers then should not look to these ads for truth. Is that a fair statement?
Certainly, the ad that's being put out against me is very misleading and certainly not true. I'm trying to focus on, building up Republicans so we can take back the House. I think that's where we need to be focusing our attention, as opposed to attacking someone.
How
or
about this?
misleading.
Theresa Gavarone gets an endorsement from, wow, longtime Congressman Bob Latta, Republican, Bowling Green, 5th Congressional District. In response to that, he is then labeled by the other side. I think he got the rhino thing, Republican in name only, somebody who has just maintained the swamp. How quickly we turn on each other in these situations.
I couldn't believe when I saw that, honestly. I have so much respect for Congressman Latta and the work he's done in his time in Congress, and before that in the General Assembly. He's a strong voice for conservative values, and to see someone try to smear him to gain political points, it's just wrong.
It appears that we can throw anybody under a bus in our own self-interest of getting elected. Now, ads against you, some of them, and I find this, and you have countered with some ads this week against, well, I can't say you because it doesn't say you. Mm-hmm. Craig Riedel, the Republican state representative over Defiance Way, you guys, somebody is busting his chops as being soft on crime. I mean, Mr. Pro-gun, pro-God, pro-Trump, because of his stand on bail reform, which many people agree needs to be addressed if we're going to really fix inequities in the criminal justice system. But then again, the ad seems to imply you let these accused criminals roam free, and it invites crime. Look at New York City. And I'm older. It reminds me of the Willie Horton ad that the Bush campaign used so effectively against Mike Dukakis back in the day. What can you say? Is that ad from you, or is it from some group that supports you that you don't even have any control over?
There are numerous ads coming from groups in Washington, D.C. right now that I haven't seen before they've gone on. I'm watching them air myself, but I have no control over the Washington groups and what they put on TV.
All right. And I'm guessing that Mr. Riedel would say some of the same things, the stuff that they're busting your chops is liberal. And pardon me, she used to be my council person in Bowling Green. Great. You can say a lot of things about Theresa Gavarone, but if you put liberal in the sentence, it's like, what's wrong with this sentence? But again, he benefits from smearing you. And here's what gets me about this. At the bottom of the ad on TV is a bunch of, paid for by some committee. We don't know who they are. They don't have to tell us who they are. We don't know where they're from. We don't know if they're sticking up for us. I don't think they care about us to begin with. I think they care about them. It gives me this feeling, Theresa Gavarone, this system is broken. Do you feel that way?
Well, I certainly don't. I'm really disheartened when you see people smearing someone else's record in a way that's not truly reflective of who they are and what they stand for and what they're about, as opposed to building on what you have gotten done in your time. I certainly have a track record of getting things done.
Time out right there, because I need to take a break. And we're going to talk something about that, because down in the state house, before you served in the Senate, and now in the Senate, you get legislation passed. And you know what, folks? You're not hearing anything about it in this campaign. And if that were me doing the work, I would just be frosted. I'm going to ask about that after this break. Stay with us. This is Leading Edge. Back on Leading Edge this weekend before the May primary, talking about the stuff we're seeing on television, doing that with State Senator Theresa Gavarone. She's on the ballot herself. She wants to be the Republican nominee in the 9th Congressional District. She seeks to go to Washington come the fall election. But I want to get back to your day job because you serve the 2nd Senate District of Ohio, and you do get legislation passed. After a tragedy at BGSU, you took the lead on getting hazing laws beefed up and, yes, enacted. You just this past week passed a bill, got it. This is the Relapse Reduction Act. On and on it goes. And yet we don't talk about any of that in an election year. And I'm wondering if that just, does that frost you, that your work gets lost in all of this political tripe?
Well, yeah, it is important to make sure people pay attention to what you're actually doing. I'm someone who's got a track record of listening to my constituents, working to find solutions to their problems and getting legislation to address them across the finish line. And really proud of my track record and the legislation that I've been able to accomplish since my time in the General Assembly.
The constitutionally mandated redrawing of our state legislative boundaries has been a partisan nightmare. And now a federal court has told the redistricting commission that if they can't or won't do what the voters have mandated, that court will likely implement a map already ruled unconstitutional. You've been part of this on the congressional redistricting. Theresa Gavarone, how did we get so far off the rails?
Well, I know I was the chair of the committee that heard testimony.
Right.
And so we listened to countless hours of testimony, and the map drawers addressed those issues in a second map that is now the map that's being voted on by, on Tuesday, May 3rd for the Congress. The congressional map is set, and we're ready to go on Tuesday. The state maps have been a different story. That is still ongoing in the, with the Supreme Court, federal court. And until those lines are set, it looks like that primary will be held later in the summer.
At a cost of millions of dollars, which again, shame on Columbus, and there's plenty of blame to go around on both sides. This should have been done by now. So I go to your site and I see the first thing that pops up, and it's really well produced. It's really nicely done. And it's your voice, I believe, talking about, here we go, I'm going to do some quotes here, the socialist spending spree in Washington of the radical left. Okay, there's a phrase we're hearing a lot, who won't be happy until, I'm going to quote here, every parent is removed from the classroom and police are taken off of our streets. And your tagline, as you know, is we've got a country to save. As I looked at it, I thought, well, if you want to go down that road with Marcy Kaptur, I get that. This to me was a spot aimed at Marcy Kaptur in the fall, but you got a primary on Tuesday. Where's your primary message that is just as beautifully produced as that spot?
Well, actually, I constantly focused on what the ultimate goal here. Yeah. The ultimate goal is to take back the House, to take back this seat, the 9th Congressional District seat. And that's the goal, to put real conservative leader in that seat. And that's, and I believe I'm that person, the strongest candidate to go toe to toe with Marcy Kaptur.
I was going to get there. We have to summarize and get this wrapped up. You believe you have a better chance of beating Marcy Kaptur than Craig Riedel has a chance of beating Marcy Kaptur.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I've worked hard throughout this district, listening to people and solving their problems. And I'm going to continue to do that. I've got a track record of getting things done. And I'm the candidate who can actually go toe to toe and beat Marcy Kaptur in November. And that's why I'm fighting hard to make sure I'm the candidate to do that.
Folks, let's all get out and vote. I know that turnout is down so far, but Tuesday's the big day. Let's get out and vote. Primaries are important. I'm tired of people in November saying, this is my choice. Well, you had a voice in the choice, and it's called a primary, and it's this Tuesday. State Senator Theresa Gavarone, candidate for Congress. Always good to see you. Thanks for spending time with us here on Leading Edge.
Thank you very much, Jerry.
You bet. Be well. And now from races to a key issue locally, next on Leading Edge. Hey, welcome back to Leading Edge. With the May 3rd primary now just bearing down on us, I think it's important to remember that while those hot button races get most of the attention, there are important issues that voters will decide on Tuesday, the 3rd. Now, one of those, it goes to safety, it goes to urban sprawl, it goes to population shifts. As one of the principals involved in this issue has said, it, quote, should have been addressed 25 years ago. And joining me, I want to welcome in Lucas County Sheriff Mike Navarre, who authored that phrase, by the way, and Springfield Township Trustee Andy Glenn. Welcome both. Sheriff, you went public last year and said, you were very candid about this, that if folks in the township, if they better pay up or you'll quit providing police patrols for them. So let's start there. Why? I mean, isn't that, some will wonder, isn't that the sheriff's department's job?
Well, the sheriff has a statutory obligation to operate a jail. There is no obligation to provide police patrols to the townships. Springfield has grown exponentially over the years, and the number of calls for service and law enforcement incidents averages about 34 per day. And that just has become unsustainable. There is not another township in the state of Ohio with that call volume that doesn't either have its own police department or a full service contract with another law enforcement agency.
Let's bring
The
it.
time really has come for Springfield to choose.
All right, let's bring in the township trustee, one of three, of course, three trustees in the township. Andy Glenn's been doing it for like 19 years. I think he started as a teenager or something. We were comparing notes. I used to take piano lessons from a teacher, and you know her, out on Hill Avenue, getting from Heather Downs, where I lived, to her house when I was a kid. That was like driving in the country. And now, as the sheriff points out, it's all developed out there. And I'm wondering, over that amount of time, we're talking decades, I mean, shouldn't the township have its own police department by now?
Absolutely. And one of the biggest questions we get is, why aren't we going to start our own department? Listen, we are way behind the 8 ball on this. Springfield Township should have started when we were smaller with our own police force for patrols. That's what pretty much all the jurisdictions around us that have their own police department, that's what they did. They were able to allow their police department to grow with their population. And it wasn't all at once. It would be next to impossible for us to, from scratch, start a police department to service a population of 29,000 people.
Okay, let's talk about this levy. It's a proposed 4.2 mil, 5-year property tax, which would generate some 2.9 million bucks, if I'm reading it right, per year for police protection. So what would taxpayers get for their money, which comes out to something like 150 bucks, 147 bucks per year for a $100,000 house, if you can find a $100,000 house these days? But what do they get? What's the bang for the buck? What do they get for those dollars?
So we would have 3 dedicated patrols 24/7, plus a supervisor during peak hours inside Springfield Township. Those officers would be in vehicles that we would purchase or lease as a township for the sheriff's department. They would be clearly marked as Springfield Township road patrols, so they would be easily identifiable. Those patrols would leave the township only on typical mutual aid type calls, so it would be the same under the same circumstances that Sylvania Township would leave Sylvania Township to come to Springfield to help out. It would be effectively our own police department at about half the cost of having our own police department.
Yeah, I don't think, Sheriff, I don't think anybody thinks of Springfield Township as a dangerous place, but you alluded to this earlier. In terms of volume of calls, it does sound like a busy place. Can you assure the townships, what'd you say, Andy, 29,000 residents? Can you assure them, Sheriff, they will be safer under this plan?
Well, they'll definitely be safer. They put a good plan together to spend that money wisely, with 3 deputies 24/7, also a community service officer during the day, with ample investigative follow-up work and supervision. The status quo really is not the option here. If this levy does not pass, there's going to be a reduction in service from what they have now.
You took me there, and I'm going to go there. Because every time we have a talk of a levy on my show, especially when there's new money, not renewals, but new money, I have to ask, what happens if this levy doesn't pass? And I know somebody out there right now is saying, okay, stand by. Here come the threats. Well, folks, if there's going to be a change in the outcome, I don't want to hear from you later. Jerry, why didn't you ask them about that? Why didn't they tell us what might have happened? So I'm going to ask, what happens, Mike Navarre, if this levy doesn't pass?
We'll put a unit out in Lucas County to service both the western townships, and we have 1 township in the east, and they will respond only to high priority calls where someone has been injured or likely to be injured. But all of the other calls, the report calls, the property calls, the nuisance calls, we will no longer respond to those. There will be a severe reduction in the amount of police service that is received currently in Springfield Township. The levy will provide an enhanced police service. Absent a levy, there's going to be a reduction, and the long-term effects. Springfield Township is a wonderful community, but the long-term effects of not having police presence is not going to be a good thing.
Jerry, can I expand on that just a little bit?
Okay, Andy, sure. This is Andy Glenn, by the way, Township Trustee. Go ahead, sir.
Right, because the one thing I want the residents to understand, because that's one of the biggest questions we get is, we're already paying for the sheriff. Why do we pay more? The fact is, we're not. What you pay to Lucas County and your sales tax and property tax living in Springfield Township is exactly the same as somebody living in Sylvania Township that has their own police department, Sylvania City that has their own police department, Maumee. Every police department in the area, those residents also pay the same county property tax and county sales tax as we do. So to think that way would be the same as Sylvania Township saying, we're going to completely disband our police department and not have it anymore and just let Lucas County handle it. The fact is, the Lucas County commissioners and the sheriff has been subsidizing police patrols in Springfield Township for decades. And we need to be appreciative of that fact and understand that for them to continue doing it, we have to pay them what would be fair for the additional deputies they have on patrol.
Okay. Is there an issue number assigned to that? I don't have that in my notes.
5.
Issue 5, May 3rd primary. We wanted to get into this. Again, this is a great community, but we're operating under the standards of yesteryear, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to thank, he's Andy Glenn, Springfield Township Trustee. And of course, you know, Sheriff Mike Navarre. Thank you both for being with us to explain this important issue that voters will decide, and to all you in Springfield Township. Thank you as always for watching. We'll come out and see you this.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks, you guys. We'll be back on Leading Edge. So let's vote. Have a great week. See you next week on Leading Edge.